Hi, and happy Monday. My name's Angelica Lamas Baker, and you've stumbled onto my podcast, The Rare Queen Out of the Blue. Hello again, and happy Monday. This is Angelica Lamas Baker with The Rare Queen Out of the Blue. This is episode 4, and I'm coming to you mobile from my mom's again, and Mom is here. We're recording from her kitchen.
Hello.
Do you want to introduce yourself? That's it.
You would.
Okay. So, yeah, my mom is here, Eunie Smith, and I guess we're going to talk about today, guess what was like raising a PKU kid. And, of course, I was a PKU kid at the tail end of that first generation that was diagnosed and treated with PKU. And a lot of PKUers, a lot of parents, and all that kind of always like to know what it's like from the perspective of a parent. And it's kind of interesting to hear the perspective of a parent from that first generation because we didn't have all the fancy things they have now. I don't know. I don't know where she's going to start. Probably, I don't know.
I remember when you were the day you were diagnosed. I didn't know what they were talking about. I remember having to go in and get that blood test they took from your artery. Femoral artery. My poor baby. They're hurting my poor baby. And then we had to go to Johns Hopkins because we lived in Maryland. And one of the first questions they asked me was, do you have a blender? Which really threw me off because I didn't understand. You're talking about my baby. You want to know if I have a blender? But they only had the one formula at that time, Lofenolac. Why don't you tell us what the Lofenolac tasted like?
Not very good, but we used to mix it with vanilla.
Surprised you're not an alcoholic with all the vanilla I used to put in.
I know, I was just talking with Terry about that. We were at the Sam's Club, and she had gotten, the last time I took her, she had got one of those gigantic things, the vanilla extract. I'm like, we used to put that in my formula. She's like, what?
And I used to have to, you had to get the water kind of, because it was kind of thick.
Yeah.
You used to have to eat like every 2-3 hours. It was exhausting, and you never did get very much. But we made it through. In Maryland at the time, they actually had... I don't know if she was a dietitian and a nurse came out to your house and visit with you like once a month, once every 3 weeks. So they would walk you through it and we would grow together. That's what they told us. So you started out on the formula. We worked on that. And then we worked on starting to get the food in there. But you only had the canned bread and there was some spaghetti. Remember the cookies?
Yeah, they were the butterscotch cookies and they were really hard.
You had to put apple slices in them to soften them up. And I used to make you cupcakes and stuff for school.
There was only one store in town you could buy all the stuff.
One store. And that can of bread was like $8.
Yeah.
I think it would be more interesting if the parents had 2 PKU kids. Because like when we went to that conference, they talked about the one kid really stays on the diet. And then the other kid's really a little headstrong like you were. And, throw this diet out the window.
Yeah. So I have an older brother, but he doesn't have PKU. So, obviously, he came first. So that was a little different.
Which is a shocker to them, too, because they couldn't figure that one out.
Yeah, they used to say statistically that the firstborn would have PKU, and they say that, obviously, it's a 1 in 25% chance if both parents are a dormant carrier of the gene. Since it is a recessive condition, that means that both parents have to be carriers, which doesn't mean that they are active carriers. You can be a dormant carrier. So a lot of parents and expecting parents and all that are getting genetic testing now. So like I know at one time my brother and his wife got the genetic testing, I think, to find out if she was a carrier when my first nephew was born. And I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that. Dean and I talk about that all the time because I don't know getting the genetic testing other than knowing that it's a possibility, but it's still a 1 in 25.
But nowadays, the parents, I think it's come so much farther that the parents, it's not as overwhelming. I mean, it is. It's overwhelming to begin with because you don't know what they're talking about. And then you're telling me my kid's going to be retarded. But they didn't know about all this other stuff. They don't talk about the emotional stuff and now the physical stuff that they're finding out. And, of course, back then, what are you going to do? It's the best you could do. And I used to worry about, well, what about all their vitamins and calcium and stuff? Oh, no, that's all in the formula. But now the formula, it was so acidic that it, ruins your teeth, it ruins your stomach, So, but, but we used to come home and fight about the formula. And that's how come you can sleep at the drop of a head. You used to fall asleep at the table so you wouldn't have to drink it.
And it get the lumps in it too. Like if you didn't mix it right, it would have like lumps, and the lumps would pop, and it would just be powder.
And I don't know how they did it at preschool, but I guess you wouldn't drink it there either. So.
And I like a straw. Like I don't know.
A lot of
adults
put it in like a thermos in a straw, so you don't have to smell it.
Yeah, and a lot of adults drink it just kind of like down it, which I had never seen until we went to a conference
anymore.
Well, no, but I never. They said they were doing that since they were kids, and I'd never seen that.
They had that flavored stuff and stuff that's not so good. I mean, when you were getting in your teens, they came out with the fennel free, which wasn't as bad.
No,
but by that time you were done.
Yeah.
See, when you were born, they told us 5 or 6 or 7. By the time you get 5 or 6 or 7, they said, "Oh no, the diet's like 8 or 9 or 10 to your teens." And so by the time you were teens, they were like, "Oh no." Until you're an adult, especially girls, if you want babies. Because they used to talk about, don't encourage your girls to have babies because they'd be retarded.
Well, yeah, and there's a few that I know, some of the PKU women that I've met that are in their 50s, which isn't that much older than me, that they were encouraged to basically have them sterilized in their teens and 20s.
I mean, I think they've come a long way, but back then, when you think about it, it's 40 years ago. I can't believe it, but it's been 40 years.
Yeah, and
if you had been born 10 years earlier than that, there would have been nothing.
Yeah, and I talk to people about that, like when I tell them about PKU, and they're like, "Well, how come they don't know this and that, and why are they just finding this out? Why are they?" People don't realize that as far as aspect of medicine and modern medicine, PKU was relatively modern.
And I remember when you were a baby, sitting up one night when trying to feed you, reading the article about they found out cystic fibrosis was a genetic thing. And that was in the early 80s, late 70s. Like, it was probably 1980. And it's like, oh, you just figured out cystic fibrosis is genetic now? But because it tied in with the 1 in 4 chance and all that. So it was an interesting article. But so I forgot where my train of thought was going. You just keep talking.
So the diet is always changed, and you're saying like when you were a teenager and they said, Diet for Life was just mandated in 2007. That became across the board by the AMA in 2007. So I was born in 79. So you have to think that even from there.
Because there's a lot of them that the parents said, no, you said when they were like 10 or 13 or like, 6 or 7 or 13, you go off the diet, and that's it. They're off the diet because you said their brain does most of their growing by the time they're 5 or 6, which we know now is not true, that your brain keeps going.
Yeah, because I know a lot of, especially boys and men, that were taken off at early ages. It was either preteens or teens, and some even sooner than that because, they said, well, your brain stops growing. And, of course, if you're one in, 2 or 3 or 4 kids, it's hard just to do that diet for one kid because sometimes it's preparing multiple meals, especially when you have 2 kids that are close in age and this kid won't eat this and this kid can't have that. It's like you got to prepare multiple meals. So everybody always asks, like with Dean and I, what's that like? You got to prepare 2 dinners every night, and you've got to do, obviously with the Palynziq, my diet's become a little bit more liberal, but it hasn't always been. And of course,
but you always have a vegetable. You should always have a fruit, vegetable, all that.
Yeah.
And now school was hard because you used to try to explain to them that you can't have those.
Yeah.
Those meals. You can't have that. And I don't know.
Because that was before IEPs and 504 and all. It was really. They existed.
Explain to them that no, she can't have that meat. She can't have that cheese. She can't have. This is what she can have.
Because back then they had to have one of the 4 basic food groups in each meal.
This basic food, and it's like, no.
So I never had lunch provided until high school. I never had lunch provided by the school. I always remember taking a box, like my own lunch.
Yeah.
And then in high school we had where I could buy French fries and they would make me a salad and they would make it without meat because one of my friends, her mom actually worked in the kitchen in the high school. So she made sure I had a salad or something. There was something always on the menu that I could eat. And that was kind of interesting because a lot of people ask, like, when you get married and you date and things like that, what's that like? And to Dean, he's just always been like, and it still is a big adjustment process for the Baker family because I always worry about holidays and things. Dean's always like, you always find something. Like, she can always find something. Don't make a big deal. I don't remember it being necessarily made a big deal in our big family.
We did not make a big deal because there was always stuff. And we all knew. So there was always stuff that was there you could eat. But, you know, it throws that, I made this, you're going to eat it or go hungry out the window. Sure.
Yeah.
Because what are you going to do? You can't eat that.
Because you can't not. But, and then there's that. And then there's like, you can't not eat.
Yeah, we never made, and that's where the central thing comes in, is food. I mean, you got to have food. And that's, you know, what's the first thing your grandma does? Sit down. Yeah, I'll make you a plate. You know, I mean, what are you going to do? But yeah, we never made a big deal of it because it was just the way it was. And that's just life. I mean, that's what they told me when you were a baby. Well, you know, that's life. Life's tough and you got to learn to live with it.
I mean, yeah, because
you know, everybody's got something. But even today, you got your vegans, you got your, I'm allergic to this. Like one of the
peanuts
cousins allergic to seafood.
Yep.
You got allergic to peanuts. You know, nowadays you can't take anything to school. You have to run it through so many things that you can't take a treat to school for their birthday and stuff.
Yeah. And I remember pizza parties. Grandma would always bring, back then you could get spaghetti from Pizza Hut with black olives because we'd have the pizza parties and she would bring spaghetti for me.
Yeah.
Or they would order it. And back then they used to make, like Thanksgiving, we'd make Thanksgiving meals.
Yeah.
At school, but the school always made sure that there was something that I could make or eat. It was always a learning process. I don't even remember the school. I mean, there was some pushback and hard because, again, back then it was, well, they need to have one of all the food groups in their meal and they need to, it was always just there. I don't remember it being made a big deal. Like nowadays it's, well, my kid's autistic, my kid's this, and they need this exception and that exception. I don't remember, you know, when trying to explain it to my husband and some other family, like, oh, you went to regular school and they didn't have an IEP, or I'm like, well, I guess it would be mainstream before mainstream was a thing. Like there was never
talk about special. I never remember talk about special classes. I mean, I do. The thing that was stressed was the mental retardation, and I can remember laying awake at night just praying, just be normal, just be normal, just be able to fit in with the kids, just be normal. But then we had to go take IQ tests as a family because if you measure people with their IQ against the world, that's not a good standard. You measure it against the family because that's where you get your genes and stuff from. And we all measured pretty. They wouldn't tell me who was smarter.
So that's always a debate: who's smarter, my brother or I?
No, they wouldn't tell between your dad and me. They never tell the parents what their IQs are because they don't want you holding that against one another. But you and Ken both were in like the 140s. And I remember my sister said, oh, 140? No. And I'm like, yeah. So that was not, I mean, that wasn't a problem. But then when you get into the emotional aspects, because it was like, I always felt your brother was like, you know, he was 25 when he was 6.
This is true.
And you were like 10 when you were 15, kind of thing. Because you were never going to leave. You were going to move in with me. You were never going to leave your mother. Ever. We were going to live together forever. And your brother was like, I'm out of here. Yeah, it was just never made a big deal. The only thing that used to make me mad was your one aunt used to point you out to people. That's the one with PK. Smack her so bad. I'm probably going to smack her the next time I see her.
Yeah.
So.
And then I didn't go to regular daycare. Usually.
That was the daycare at the college.
Well, I mean, I went to daycare at the college, I mean, when we lived in Lawrence, but I didn't go to...
You used to give them a hard time because they had to take you down to the basement after a certain time. And my mommy will never be able to find you. That poor girl used to have to... I'm going to find you. I
get random memories from that daycare, too, because I remember one year we went to an Easter egg hunt at one of the frat houses. They like for their community service. And Dean's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, we lived near... Dad was going to KU at the time. We lived in Lawrence. I said, it was a college daycare, and frats and sororities do community service, and the frat had an Easter egg hunt. And I remember, because the Easter eggs were hidden in the billiard table, the holes, it's just little, my memory. So the thing with PKU is, it's not that you don't have a long-term memory, it's that it's spotty. and your short-term memory is not the greatest. So something can have happened yesterday or today or 2 days ago, and I don't necessarily remember it, but then it comes back in random bits and pieces.
But I think that's a lot, because I don't remember. I mean, when you think about your childhood, it's like day after day after day. It's the same thing. I don't remember a lot. I just remember bits and pieces from my childhood. I don't remember a daily basis.
I mean, I feel like those are some of my earliest memories is, the Easter egg hunt at the frat, and then I had a friend named Olga, and they were from the Czech Republic.
I don't remember Olga.
She was at the daycare, and then I remember going skating. Like, I can remember Luann and living and like skating with some of the teenagers on the street, like learning how to roller skate, and some of that. But I don't remember a whole lot. I just find it interesting that back then it wasn't. Like I said, I don't remember anything ever being made a big deal. It just was. And there's a group of us cousins that were all near the same age. And I remember, of course, going to the college daycare. But then I remember once I got to school age, I really didn't go to daycare. Like in the summers, Aunt Doris took care of us. And then we were out at Aunt Mary's.
And Luann.
We were always with family or somebody close. Whereas now kids go to daycare. And, of course, they've got to make sure the daycare knows to take care of this, this, and this. And I don't remember even being at Aunt Doris's. I mean, I remember some of my memories are we found that recipe for the milkshake.
I mean,
the low-protein milkshake. And we would make those, like, as kids, everybody would make their milkshake, and I would make mine differently. But
I mean, I had to go into the daycare in the schools and have meetings with them about your diet and stuff. But, no, it wasn't like, we're going to have special classes and stuff.
No, the only special class I remember is math. I've always had trouble with math. And I was in speech therapy for a while.
But I did keep you in the same school district there.
Yeah.
Or you were in the same school district from what, kindergarten on?
No, because I went to kindergarten. I went to kindergarten day.
You went to kindergarten at Baser.
Yes. Preschool kindergarten in Lawrence, then kindergarten in Baser, because I basically started early.
Was in, like, middle school or something.
Because I went to kindergarten with Craig.
When we moved up to Turner.
Yeah. So I went to kindergarten with my cousin. We were in the same class, and then we moved to Turner. And so first grade up.
Yeah. But Ken was in like the fourth or fifth grade. I remember when we switched schools with him that first time. Oh, the look on his face. I just wanted to snatch him up and run home with him. Because he looked so like he didn't know what was going to happen. But then he made fast friends. He's that kind of guy.
Yeah.
So, and then by the time we moved here, I kept you guys in the same school system.
Yeah, we were in the same school system from like first grade to my graduation.
Which, that's a continuity thing. There wasn't much continuity. We were moving all the time, but we moved in the same district.
Well, it was the continuity. It was that. It was also a school district that my family went to. Like, everybody kind of knew.
But it was smaller, too.
Yeah, Grandpa worked for the school district. And Dad and his siblings had all gone to the school district. So the family was it was a small community inside of a large city. So it was kind of like a small town. Because some of my teachers went to school with Dad. Like, I remember that. And some of them had Kenny. And, like, I had the same band teacher in my fifth grade as I had in high school. So by the time I got to high school, he knew about my PKU. He knew about all that because he had already kind of gone through.
No, I would kind of like to know your brother's perspective on it, but I know it was kind of hard on him, but I think it was just because he's just got a different personality. His and my personality are different. And I think that's where the problem comes in. Because he's got OCD kind of thing, and I'm like, whatever.
Yeah. And I don't know, so like last year...
You guys, it seems like he used to take care of me, and he used to be very protective, and then I don't know what happened all the time. He just decided that he couldn't handle that anymore.
So that's my problem. So last year I went to the big Nord had the Live Strong Forum, and it was the first time that they had that. And it was in Houston, and they had a section of it where it was families, and they had a sibling come up, and she was very, and I had a problem with because she was very rose-colored glasses about the whole thing, that her younger sibling had a rare condition, and she just remembered oh, she just loves it, and she loved it, always taking care of her, and always this. And I did ask, I said, but I want the truth. Like, you're the older sibling. I know that that's hard.
But the situation also was I was a single parent.
Yeah.
And, I mean, and I don't think your brother understands the reason I let him go out to your aunt's house all the time is because he needed that male. You needed a male figure, too. But he needed a male figure. And he also needed to get away from that constant drink your formula, drink your formula, drink your formula, constant monitoring. So he needed to have someone, that male figure. And, you know, so that's one reason why I went ahead and let him go out there, because I knew that he was taken care of and he had that male figure and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you had grandma and grandpa, but.
Yeah. And I do, like, even to this day, I mean, when we go visit, he has to do all the shopping. His wife offers to go do the grocery shopping and cook, and he has to do all the shopping. It. And he has to, because, no, I have to buy this and I have to buy that because she can't have this and she can't have that. And so, I mean, it's kind of ingrained in you.
But I don't think that's all what, I think your personality and his personality, I think the personalities are so different that you just don't see eye to eye on so much stuff. It's not that the love isn't there, it's just that. It's just the different personalities that you just, but yeah, he's so, he's calmed down a little.
He has. And it's hard because now my diet's changing again. It's like, kind of like my in-laws are like, we finally almost kind of got a handle on your diet. Now you're telling us to throw all that out the window.
Yeah.
And start from scratch. I'm like, well, welcome to my life.
So, yeah, so, I mean, that was the biggest thing when you were growing up. I mean, what do you say? It's just the way it was.
I mean, because there's a lot of parents, what do you think, versus, so now there's Google.
I do remember having that conversation with Sarah that time about how, oh my God, I couldn't get you to drink your formula. It was such a you were probably 7. No, you were probably constant struggle. And it was just, and she finally, because, you know, that's about when, I don't know if that's when HIPAA started to come out. And she was like, you know, finally, she's like, you're not alone. I hear this from a lot, but the problem is you can't get these parents together to have these little conversations and stuff. Like you said, there's Google and stuff now. You can find other parents, but back then, and they couldn't tell you. They couldn't say, you know, she did it. They did have the picnics and stuff, but you couldn't say, here, we're going to hook you up with another parent. They're going to tell you how it is. Because you have those parents with the 2 kids, like I said, like parents with 2 or 3 kids, and one kid's like just flying through it, and the other kid's like, no way. I'm going to eat that. You're not going to know it.
I mean, what do you think it's like? Like, when you got the phone call back in 79 and you found out, and it's like, okay, no, wait, because we're going to have to find this information. Then we're going to have to test her. And then we've got to take her in for 2 weeks and do the testing. And then they call you within 48 to 72 hours. They just come get her.
Yeah.
Because, no. But now they call you and tell you, well, your kid tested positive and stuff like this.
They should
and
your media still.
Well, they still test twice, but their immediate go-to is to go to Google.
Yeah.
And go to the internet. Like, what do you think? Dean and I have this argument all the time. Like, do you think that's a good thing? Like, I understand there's a point to doing research, but then there's so much mixed.
I think I went to the library.
There's so much mixed information on the internet because every PKU patient is different because it is a spectrum.
But at least you get, I mean, they told us, I got the phone call, and they said, you need to come in, we need to do some more blood work, but don't worry about it yet. And I think they told us it was a metabolic condition or something. And then, so then they did that blood work, and that came back. And then they said, you have to go up to Johns Hopkins, because like I said, we're in Maryland, so that's where we went. And when we got there, that's when they gave us the booklets and explained stuff. I think you had to be up there for a 3-day challenge. But even so, they were like, just keep giving her formula because, you know, we don't know yet, and we'll let you know all that stuff.
So when you guys found out, and I was born, so you guys were living in Maryland, and all the family was in Kansas. So you were by yourself.
Yeah.
So there was really no, I mean, Grandma had come up for a little while, but there was really no support system.
Well, they had those nurses.
Yeah. But there was no family support system. And even then, even as big as the family is, nobody knew. Because I was the first one.
It just was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when we got up to then they had the 3-day challenge when you were up there, when you were like 12 days old. You were a little old. It's 12 days. they explained about the diet and all that. But you were on formula, so right then it was just like, well, you're on formula and you don't worry about the food and stuff yet. And then when you were 3 months old, you had to take for that's what you're talking about, the 3-day challenge. And we were up there anyway and so we were supposed to be up there for 3 days. And after a day and a half, they told us to take you home. I was like, well, you said 3 days. They're going, no. We gave her regular milk and shot right up to 57 in like a day. So we don't have to do any more tests.
And that's kind of the way it is now. Like, if I deviate one step, it just will spike everything.
Yeah.
And then
I do remember when you get up and change your diaper. Oh my God. My eyes would burn so bad.
Because that is like, so I am reading like on some of the boards, and that has been a comment recently, like they don't really tell new parents, or parents don't understand that because the metabolics of it in your urine and stuff, so you get like a different smell. It's a stronger smell. Like if you can kind of tell where your levels are at and different things because your kidneys break up all of that. And
I'm telling you. And that's where we got in a discussion with them about those people with the maple syrup urine disease. They had that thing. They were black, and they were like, "We're black people don't get those."
Well, that's what they said with me, though. Right. It's Hispanic, like she can't be Mexican.
Right.
Like,
are you sure? And that was like, I can remember. Are you sure they have the same fathers? And I was so insulted. What do you mean? Are you sure he's Mexican? I was so insulted because like what I just So, but yeah, and they said that mother kept insisting there's something wrong with my baby. There's something wrong with my baby, and they wouldn't believe her. And she said, and I think she finally said the diaper's on here, and his urine smelled like maple syrup. And that's how they finally decided they needed to test him. They said, no, that's because like you just have one, but maple syrup urine, there's like 2 different, and then they have like imagine that's trying to figure out that diet.
You see, and there's never, it's because I went to the same school system, so I graduated with a lot of the kids that I went to grade school with.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of nice because even when I went out, not that I went out with friends very often, but when I did, they knew.
I remember when you were in the hospital, you used to have to take your formula, explain it to them, take your formula.
Still do that. Yeah. They still won't feed me when I'm in the hospital. You guys have to bring food in, or they're like, oh, we're only going to keep her for this long until she has to absolutely eat, then we'll let her go. Or, yeah, that's still a thing. But that's because every hospital is not equipped to deal with it. And the one hospital that was our go-to, which is, KU here, and that's where I went to for years for my PKU, they closed their clinic. So they used to be my go-to to go, and now they're not, and I have to go to Children's Mercy, because you always have to go to the pediatric clinic. There's no adult clinics. Mail still comes addressed to the parents of.
Yeah.
I don't know what other, I'm trying to think of questions that I see, new parents ask. I
would probably say, like they told me, you grow with it, and it's not, I think nowadays it's not as, I don't want to say traumatic. That's not as.
Testing. Okay, so you're saying it's not that it's not necessarily traumatic is the word, but.
I mean, it's overwhelming. I mean, any kind of diagnosis is overwhelming. And you just have to seek out other people who have been through it, and you can get through it. You're not alone. And you grow with it. First, you're going to have the kid on formula. That's every baby's on formula or breastfed. And, you kind of grow. You grow with the diet grows with the kid, and you grow with the diet, and then after a while, you're just like, oh, yeah, well, whatever. And nowadays it's more, like you said, the IEPs and stuff in the schools, it's more. But every kid's going to be,
I mean, every person is unique. I mean.
Yeah. Everybody's going to have their strengths and weaknesses. Everybody's going to have their own personality.
What do you think as a parent who has raised a kid who's now over 40 and all that, and you have seen other PKU kids grow up, and obviously we do have some that are researchers, they're police officers, they're lawyers.
I'm surprised. But seriously, because the way they talk to me is like, you just have a regular,
So the controversy, there's a big controversy in the community because in my generation, there are some men, mainly men, who have served in the military.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, Dad was in the military and was a recruiter, and he researched a lot as I was growing up because obviously it was a curiosity for him. It's one of those disqualifiers. Well, and they will admit that they basically had to lie because they were raised and they were taken off diet at such a young age. They were told it was a non-factor growing up, so they never disclosed it. But then now they've decided, they've got to go back on diet because they found all these issues. And by the time they're already in the military, they have a desk job or they have whatever. Like, I know my emotional issues, and I know that the family overall is predisposed to depression and things like that. But my PKU amplifies it because the serotonin in my brain and the brain chemicals.
Right. But I think there's certain traits. Like, I can remember when I was working and that gal came in and she's like, but I have PKU. Oh, you're one of the twins. Now I get it. And I was like, my daughter has PKU. So I think there's certain traits, like with any subculture, whatever, there's certain traits that just kind of, so like you say, they're a policeman there. I can't, it's just such a fluid job that I can't see him doing it, that staying, stable and all that. I just, like that guy who travels around as a filmmaker or something.
Yeah, Kevin.
But he's on his own, I guess.
Louisiana. Well, he was a news journalist, and he has traveled all over the world.
But he would be basically working on his own. I mean,
yeah, he lives out of Shreveport, and he for a short time was doing a podcast. I mean, he's done the documentaries for MPKUA and all that sort of stuff. I mean, he is pretty well known, as far as that goes. But I do know there are musicians. There are obviously people have gone into the medical field.
Because I think you guys need like structure. You need that structure. You need that continuity, and that's just not like that one guy who worked for Frito-Lay before he got back on his diet. And he's like, frankly, if I wasn't at Frito-Lay and be able to go out on my own, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Yeah,
because they said, and I think it's kind of turned out that the median time you guys work at one job is 3 to 4 years.
Yeah,
and then you can't handle it anymore or something. I don't know what the problem is really.
I don't know. I mean, the one job I had was pretty intense, and they rotated us out after 3 or 4 years anyway because it was so the type of work I was doing because it was very in depth, but it was also working for the law enforcement community down researching and tracking organized crime and criminals, and it was very.
You could do it on your own.
Well, I could do it on my own, but it was very. I already had emotional issues and things, and part of what it was is I worked for a cell phone company, but it was a division that was created out of 9/11 for the government. And so I tracked, and I had to look at photos, and I had to like child photos and things like that, and abuse photos, and it's very traumatic. So they rotate us out every 3 years.
I was gonna do a trauma. What do they call it? I forget what they call it here. It's a trauma nurse. Trying to do the trauma nursing. I took a seminar. I couldn't. No, you want me to do what? See those little kids and those? No. Everybody has emotional issues. I don't care. Everybody's got some sort of baggage.
True.
I mean, I worked the same job for 17 years, but then again, I had bills to pay. So.
I mean, I guess my question is, what do you think now when they say, because people, number one, I always say this to people because everybody's wanting to know, is it a disease? Is it a disorder? And I always just say, well, it's a condition because I just find it to be a state of being.
More a condition.
Like, I feel like disease has like a negative connotation.
I mean, that was totally metabolic disorder.
And that's like my kids, when people think of disease, they think, a person's dying or this, that, and the other. And when I do my lobbying and stuff, there's a lot of talk like, well, you're not going to die. It's quality versus quantity of life.
But, it progresses as with everything. Like the rare diseases now, they have a voice. Before there was no voice.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure if you were born 10, 15 years earlier, they would have been like, find a good institution.
Well, and that was the thing is,
nowadays you're like, what?
Well, because we took Terry and Michael, we went up to St. Joe to the psychiatric hospital, and we had found that, and I've talked about this in one of the podcasts when I explained about my PKU. We found a plaque that had a list of some of the diseases and disorders that would get you institutionalized there for, and PKU was actually listed, which Terry kind of knew because she does go to some of the stuff, and she's worked in medical records, and she has 2 autistic kids, so she kind of knew some of that. But it was the first time that it really, the reality hit Michael, because he did go to middle school on up with me, and to him, he could not even fathom the reality that he's like, but it's completely treatable as long as you're on your diet.
Yeah,
As long, it's kind of like autism. He's like, why would you? They gave them lobotomies because there's always that big controversy that JFK's sister had it.
But back then, they didn't have autism.
True.
There's some sort of behavior disorder. They didn't know what that was. I think someday everybody's going to just have some form of autism. Honestly,
Yeah.
I mean, some of it is just, how do you know if it's just regular stuff or else? And, back then, you didn't have behavior problems because you had the nuns and you had the community and you were going to get your butt beat and in the corner. So, we didn't have all that.
I mean, I don't know. I find it kind of interesting to talk to people about that. And like when people talk about, because Dean and I talk, he's like, what do you think about the gene therapy? And they want to find a cure. To me, it's not something that's not.
They did talk about that when you were kids, but something to do with the liver. And she was like, they talk about liver transplants. Liver. She was, well, that's.
Yeah, and they actually.
But that's a little extreme. But nowadays, back then, everything was a stigma. Nowadays, there's no stigma on anything except maybe, something extreme. Nowadays, you're not hidden away. You don't hide these people away. You get out there and you lobby for what you need. So I think in that way, it's easier that, it just is. And, people don't like it. That's her tough. Get away from me then. I mean, I haven't seen many parents, but I remember you going to that picnic when you were like 18, 19, and they were wondering where you must so young to have such a little kid. And you're like, no, that's me. I have the PKU, and all the parents gathered around you.
Yeah, that is. So Dean doesn't go to a lot of stuff with me because they will corner him.
They go on the mental retardation thing, and you're thinking, oh my God, my kid. And then you see somebody walking around driving and, working and what?
Yeah. What? Do you think that they fixate on the negative?
No, I think it's because it's such an important part, because when you think about it, if you just said, oh, well, and then you're like, oh, well, okay, we'll slack on the diet. And the next thing you know, you have a kid who can't. You saw that. Remember that video you showed that one time of that kid that was on the diet and then they took her off, and within like how many days she just regressed?
Yeah. And, Dean and I don't know, we talk about that a lot. Like, what is the difference?
I think as you're older, it's less of a problem, but still, when you're young like that, and you think, oh, it's no big deal, and then you end up with, what's wrong with this kid?
I don't know. We talk a lot, especially because, like, we're grandparents now. It's like, you have these parents that are kind of, I guess, the term is extreme helicopter parents. Like, I know because, and I've written about it, like, I remember when I was like 23 and I decided I was going to go back, and I went back and talked to them, that I was told, well, because your family never made a big deal about it, that's why you don't understand. That basically, it was in denial.
That we didn't make a big deal about it, but it was just the reality. What are you going to make a big deal about?
But that's
the reality of it.
There's the thing that where parents, like, they put medical alert bracelets on. See, like, we were always told, don't put a medical alert bracelet on her because you would treat the acute, because you could always adjust the diet for the phenylalanine. And there were some liquid in it that have.
I don't think back then they would even thought about that.
Yeah. Because even Dean and them, like, well, diabetics, they have medical alert bracelets.
Well, yeah, because, if you go into a diabetic coma, you're in real trouble.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, I mean, a paramedic, they're not going to go and research whether or not there's phenylalanine in this medicine or whatever, and you treat the acute first, and then you can always adjust your diet and your PKU to account for. Because I have been in the emergency room here and there, like, you want to treat for.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the condition is, I think, and there's a lot of it that just is. I mean. Yeah, I mean, with diabetic kids, the family knows and stuff, so I'm sure it's just built into. I mean, you think they're making a big deal of it every day when they're eating? I mean, yeah, they have to check their blood sugars and stuff. I'm trying to think of another condition that would be comparable. That I can't think of one when kids are little. That you could. I mean, it's just built into the family structure. I mean, it's just a day-to-day thing. I mean, so.
I mean, yeah, it's hard. Like, Dean likes kind of going to the conventions, but then in the conferences, but then he's like, I kind of don't like going because they all just sort of swoop on him like vultures. Like, what do you mean you're married to a PKU?
But I'm sure
adult,
he sees the
what's
same
the
traits in
difference?
all these PKU people.
Oh yeah, no, he does enjoy going because we do have,
And that's not being, but I mean, there are just certain traits in certain cultures and certain subcultures. You can just kind of tell, like, you just, oh yeah, I get it.
Do you think that, because Dean's observation when he goes to these things, and when we've hosted things, it's more women than men.
Going to them?
Like, the patients overall, there's more girls, there's more women, there's more moms involved, you don't see as many of the boys and the men. And he's like, well, all the things are like cooking events and they're this. Why aren't there any male, because there are families that we've met, because the dads do corner Dean and they ask, like, what's that like?
Thing, I think. More like, it's still more of a woman's world to take care of the kids and stuff, huh?
Well, they ask him, what's it like? They worry, well, is my daughter going to get married? Why would you marry somebody with PKU? I mean, Dean's like, I don't know, that's kind of an insulting question. Well, did you know she had it when you got married because she was off diet? And he's like, well, I always kind of knew. We just never knew what it meant or what, I didn't understand.
Well, I think they I don't know if they still downplay the marriage and kids stuff now. I'm not even sure the marriage was, I think it was down.
Well, because to me, it always seems like, and I hear this from other PKU women and adults and men, that nobody's going to want to marry you with this, you're always basically going to be on your own.
Well,
you're never going to be
changing now. I think nowadays with the new diets and new formulas and stuff, I think that's changing now. Why wouldn't you get married?
I mean,
why wouldn't you have kids?
Yeah, I mean, they find it interesting that my friends go and attend the conferences with me or come to events. Like, what do you mean your friends? They're involved in your care, and I just think that's part of your support system. Like, you need to have, it's nice to have a support system within the community, but part of survival, I mean, I kind of look at it like, especially being that I returned to treatment, it's almost kind of like an addiction. And like a 12, so you got to have that sort of support system. You got to do it for yourself, but you've got to have support systems in place. They find it interesting that you still go to doctor's appointments with me every once in a while, or go to a conference and you still research and read up, and I'm 40.
But I would do that with your brother too if he'd let me. Let me tag along to your doctor's appointment. Let me hold your hand. I mean, I think it's just changed. I mean, but yeah, I would just say with new parents, you just got to learn to go with the flow. It's gonna be all right. You're gonna get through it. You might have an obstinate, stubborn kid who's not gonna,
But how is that any different than the other?
Right, and then you might have
Sam has 2 kids now.
Diet and tell you every little thing they ate, and that's fine. It's as long as you can keep them till they're old enough to get their own decisions in there, and they're going to have to eventually be on their own anyway. So you might as well teach them to cook now, like any other kid. Teach them to do their laundry, teach them to cook, teach them to clean, teach them to pay their bills.
Okay, I want to thank you all for joining us again for episode 4. This is our first Mommy and Me episode for the Rare Queen Out of the Blue, where my mom and I kind of talked a little bit about raising a PKU kid and just kind of her perspective about me growing up and PKU, how it's changed and all that sort of stuff. So we'll probably have Mom for another few episodes. She's not going to be on every episode, but we'll probably have her for another few episodes. I want to thank you all again and again. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions for my mom, if you have any questions for me, if you have any suggestions of topics you want me to talk about, or you want me and my mom to talk about, or maybe if I can get one of my friends to join me, what it was like having a rare disease patient or PKU patient as a friend growing up, let me know. You can find me on Facebook at Angie Out of the Blue, Instagram Angie Out of the Blue, Twitter at Rare Queen Angel. And of course, you know where to catch this podcast because you're listening. We're on Podbean, Google Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, and I feel like there's 1 or 2 others because it seems like every week we're adding a new platform. So I hope you guys have a great rest of the week, and I love you guys. I will talk at you again soon.